What's on the menu for today?
What's going on? Welcome into week 6. It is Connor's favorite week of the year as it is the Panda game. We are going to get into that last because we know that's what everyone is really here for. So Connor, it's time for Pedro to go 5 straight, or is it going to Carlton? Well, you guys will find out. Toronto at Waterloo, though, Connor. What are we expecting in this one?
I am expecting a whole lot of running from the Toronto Varsity Blues. We saw what Stoikos did last week. Man, he tore it up on the ground. And that, and we see what that does to the Toronto offense. When he's turning, they're turning. On the flip side of this one, I don't know. I don't really know what to expect from Waterloo. I think we need to expect more consistency. I think they don't need to go back to the drawing board. I think they need to go back to what they were doing the first few weeks.
And I think that Nolan Cabin is just going through some growing pains. And I think
Absolutely.
that they're going to ride with him and figure this out as they go. But it's definitely going to be a tough game to play. And especially, like you mentioned with Lucas Stoikos, if Adam Williams is back from his injury for the U of T Varsity Blues, it's going to be a ground attack and a ground assault from the boys in double blue.
And I want to see them keep being aggressive on the defensive side of the ball too, because again, we saw how well that worked last week against York.
I agree with that one. Let's talk about more ground games.
I was going to say, about ground games.
We have the Western Mustangs playing at the McMaster Marauders. Connor, they ran for like 400 yards last week.
Yeah, it was impressive.
It was. And they are going to look to do every ounce of that again. Edward Winati, Keon Edwards, both averaging over 100 yards in a game. And Evan Hillock has been Mr. Efficient this year. 11-0 touchdown to interception ratio.
Yeah, the Western Mustangs offense, I don't think we need to spend too much time there. We talked about it all season long. We know what they are. We know what they do. We know how impressive they are. We know how efficient they are. I do want to talk about the defensive side of the ball, though, because as much praise as we've given the Western offense, their defense has looked every bit as good this year, and they've got some leaders on the back end.
Yeah, absolutely. Daniel Valente and Robert Panabaker are 1 and tied for 2 in U Sports for interceptions with 4 and 3 respectively. McMaster's thrown the ball a lot this season. I think Dueck has one of the highest attempted passes in the country. That's going to be a tough matchup for him, though.
It certainly will, and I think that's what's really going to come down to. I mean, how much is Dueck going to be able to control the field with his arm? What is Western going to limit? What are they going to give him? What are they going to take away? And for Mac, I think, how are they going to beat that? And they're going to need to go to the ground at some point. And what does that look like?
I don't know. We will potentially find out this week. Let's go now. The York Lions off their Red and Blue Bowl loss, heading to the Queens Gales, who just laid a smashing down on the Guelph Griffins.
They certainly did. And it was largely due to the heart and souls of their offense. Anthony Souls, man, over 200 and 3 touchdowns on the ground last week. Four touchdowns on the ground last week. My mistake.
School record with that. Honestly, for me, we didn't see James Keenan much. I'm not aware if he had an injury or if they just pulled him because they knew the game was out of hand. Either way, I don't think that James Keenan really has to play this week. I think Alex Freakin showed a great job in commanding the offense last week. And the way that Anthony Souls and Yan Longa are running, this Queens Gales team is going to keep that going.
And another team with a ton of guys on the back end.
Yeah, I know. Ethan Martin, Keegan Vanek, Austin Miller Melanson. These guys are definitely getting to the ball and making plays happen for the Queens Gales. So keep an eye for them as well, as they are back at Richardson after their little quick road trip to Guelph.
Yeah, it should be a great game. Good atmosphere, as always, in the Limestone City. But let's move on to the final game on the schedule, not the final game that we're going to talk about. We're missing one very important one here. But the Laurier Golden Hawks in Windsor taking on the Windsor Lancers, who are a new look Windsor Lancers this year, I want to say.
They've been playing teams really tough, but Laurier has been the toughest out in the OUA. I think that Laurier is probably one of the best teams in the conference, but they have just lost some crazy tight games like last week. If Campbell Fair doesn't have a bionic leg and hits from midfield, yeah, you heard that right, 55-yard stripe. There might be a different outlook on the Laurier Golden Hawks. I am still very high on this team, and I think that they are going to soar against the Windsor Lancers.
I could not agree more. I think last week we saw the formula kind of for how to beat the Windsor Lancers. Let Joey Zorn run. We know he's going to do it. So let him run for 100 and a touchdown, but take away literally everything else. And we saw Carleton do that. I think Laurier has just as good a defense and has the ability to do that again this week to Joey Zorn and the Windsor Lancers offense here. And on the other side of this one, Taylor Elgersman, man, it feels like we talk about him every week. I think we do talk about him every week.
We do, because he is what's going to make the difference for this Laurier team down the stretch. And against Windsor, I think it's critical that he starts to get into a rhythm, and efficiency starts to build as we head towards the playoffs.
But we shouldn't forget about Quentin Scott. Runs the lights out of games as well this season.
They have been running the ball very well. Not as flashy as some of the other running backs and the numbers that we're seeing across the conference, but he's still a very strong runner, and they have one heck of a ground game. Connor, it's Panda time, though.
It's time.
It's time to decide who rules the city, who rules the nation's capital, and who gets to keep the lovely Pedro the Panda.
This is, I think, without hesitation, one of my favorite games. Certainly, biasly, one of my favorite games on the calendar year. But it truly is. I mean, there's a few games across the country that really feel like this one. It's got the whole city of Ottawa behind this, and it doesn't matter if you went to the school or not. You pick a side, whether it's you live closer to Carleton, you live closer to Ottawa, you like a logo better. Everybody come Panda time seems to pick a side. And it's so much fun for the entire city too.
And I think this year especially, I mean, it's such a good matchup with Ottawa playing so well offensively. John Paul Simon-Kinda has been tearing defenses apart, and then Ben Miracle and that vast receiving core with a ton of weapons. They have been taking advantage of every opportunity they've been given. On the defensive side, Kevin Victome, James Peters, you guys hear those names week in, week out, and that's because they make one hell of a difference for the Ottawa GGs.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you said it earlier on tonight, but Coach Nate Taylor has gotten this Ottawa GGs offense clicking on a level I don't think I've ever seen before. This is going to be a great matchup, but I mean, I guess I got to talk about Carleton because you were talking about my Ottawa GGs here. So forcing my hand, but no, I mean, on the other sideline, we talk about Ben Miracle at quarterback for Ottawa, but great quarterback in their own right with Tanner DeYoung. I mean, one of the most veteran guys, if not the most veteran guy in the league. But we know what he can do. We've seen his arm. He's got a phenomenal right arm, great arm talent, can throw from a variety of different arm angles, and just does so much within the Carleton scheme to get guys open with his vision, with his arm, just with the way he commands the offense.
And I think the biggest thing with Carleton this week, the Ferdinand, we didn't see them against Queens. We saw them back last week against Windsor, but Kasim and Denny Ferdinand are the playmakers for the Ravens. When the ball's in their hands, good things happen for the black, white, and red. And I think the game is going to come down to how effective and how often can those boys get involved.
I will say one thing, though. If Tanner DeYoung starts jumping over people and truck sticking people, it might be a different game.
I don't know. He has a history of hurdling someone in the Panda game. So we will see what happens this week from TD Place. That's all for this week. If you guys want to catch these games, make sure you head over to OUA.tv. It is free to sign up. You just need your email. You can watch any game live and on demand. I'm sure the Panda game is going to be cable television as well somewhere in Ottawa, but head over to OUA TV because you can watch multiple games at once on that. So that is definitely the best way to go. For Conrad, though, enjoy week 6. We'll see you guys afterwards where we get to recap all the craziness that's about to go down in the OUA.
What's on the menu?